All right, we're back. In this session, we're going to be looking at marriage goals. If you're not married, you can just skip this section. You can go to the one on friends, or if you have a family, you can go to the next one, which will be on family. But this is looking at marriage goals. So we're going to apply vision, personality traits, gifts, and values to your goals. I had you work on a vision statement. I had you look at values. I had you look at your personality type, some of your traits. And then I tried to get you to make a vision statement for your personal life, but also your marriage. If you're married, what's your vision for your marriage? What do you want to do? Now, that can be sometimes hard, but I hope in this session I'm going to try to help you work on your marriage, work on your values, work on your personality traits, and you can sort of do it maybe separate, or it might be a good idea to do it together as a couple. I think if you do it as a couple, you'll have a lot of fun. So we're going through the 7 connections. We looked last time at personal goals, and now we're looking at marriage goals. All right, marriage goals, the quick start. We did the quick start with the personal goals. We'll do the same thing with the marriage goals. Number 1, where in your marriage life are you hurting? And what do you want to do about it? That's probably the simplest thing that you can do. Just, and maybe if you're sitting there with your spouse, just on a piece of paper, both of you write down, that'd be interesting. Both of you write down, I think we're hurting in this area. I mean, it might not be a huge hurt, but maybe it's a small thing. You never clean up after yourself. You're too busy with work. You don't spend time with me. Whatever it might be, but each one of you write separately and then compare notes. Maybe you'll come up with the same thing, or maybe you'll have something different. The second question on the quick start is, where in your marriage life do you want to take something to the next level? So it's not an area where maybe you're hurting, but maybe it's an area that you want to go, to the next level. So maybe it's a hobby that you do together, or maybe it's like a date night thing. I mean, you've done it in the past, but really you haven't made it a specific goal. It's sort of haphazard, but you want to take whatever that is to the next level. Maybe it's your intimacy that you want to take to the next level. You want to talk about that. You want to read a book about it. Maybe you want to find an interest that you can share with one another. So where are you hurting in your marriage, or where do you want to take something to the next level? Okay, that's the easiest way to go about it. Then there's the long version, the marriage long look. And here's some areas to start thinking about. There's your devotions, your shared interests. Do you have shared interests? If you don't, maybe that's the thing you want to work on. Shared mission. God put you together to be a blessing together. 1 plus 1 is more than 2. So why did God uniquely put you together? For what purpose? For what cause? Work schedules. A lot of times husband and wife they don't match up with the work schedules. How do you work around that? Meal time. Do you even have a time where you sit down together? Date night, as I mentioned before. Intimacy. And I can't read this one that's behind here, but it's on your worksheet. So these might be areas that you start thinking about, and then you might come up with a list of goals under each one of these. Goals for your devotions. Do you do devotions together ever? Do you do things together? Shared interests. How do you manage work schedules? Do you ever eat together? So under each one of these, you could come up with several goals. Okay, well, what's your personality traits? And what I did is on your worksheet, I have introvert, extrovert. I have this little, you did it with the personal, but here again, you get to do it as a married couple. And again, I would suggest that, well, there's a couple ways to do it. One, you could do yourself, which you've done already. Okay, so I lean towards the introvert. I'm in the middle here. I'm sort of in the middle here. I'm more of a dreamer. Okay, so I might do myself, but then I should, without telling my wife, I should think, okay, now what is she like? Okay, my wife is over here on the extrovert side. She's probably more of a feeler. She's probably in the middle of the negative and the positive. Dreamer, doer, she's probably on the doer side. Fun living, probably in the middle. Risk taker, she's more on the calculated. Okay, so I'll do what I think I am, and I will do what I think my wife is, and now we'll compare. What did my wife say about herself? And what did I say about her? And does that match up? Do I know my wife, or do I think the same thing about my wife that my wife thinks about herself, and vice versa? So this is kind of a fun, interesting thing. And maybe you do know your spouse, but your spouse doesn't know her or himself. So there's many different ways that you can go with this. But I think it's helpful to understand how your personality traits are similar or quite different, and that can inform you as to what's going on. The more that married people are sort of right down the middle, if both are sort of right down the middle, then you're not very extreme people. And it's easier to sort of get along, but it's kind of boring because you're sort of alike. The more extreme, if you're an extreme introvert and your spouse is an extreme extrovert, there is a balance between the two. Okay, and a lot of times husbands and wives seek balance. You can have, here on the talker, if you have one that's a talker and the other's a talker, how does that work? You can't have two talkers. So generally, one will be a talker and one will be a listener. And, but if you're in the middle, then it sort of works out. But if you're an extreme talker, then you need an extreme listener. But this extreme talker is sort of upset sometimes with the listener. How come you never say anything? Well, it's because you're always talking. And how come you never listen? It goes back and forth. So if you're extreme in terms of your personality traits, it means you have more fun. It's more interesting. But it's also a bigger challenge in terms of getting along. The thing that you love about your spouse is the thing you don't love about your spouse. So that might explain some of how you guys operate together. All right, so in the light of your personality trait differences and similarities, what goals can you think of that might improve your marriage? So in the light of, I'm an extrovert, you're an introvert, what goals can we have together? How do we balance this? In the light of, you're a thinker, I'm a feeler, or, in the light of, we're both one way or another. So you see, you look at these personality traits, and then you start trying to brainstorm goals. So what kinds of goals should, in the light of our personality traits, in the light of that, what kinds of goals should we come up with? If I'm always doing all the talking, you're doing all the listening, and I'm frustrated with you, then sometimes we have to have a little exercise where, on Friday night, on our date night, for the first 10 minutes, I, the talker, remain silent. And you, the listener, have to, say something. Sometimes I've done that with a couple. I say for 5 minutes, I want you to just talk and the other just listen, and the one listening cannot say one single word. And if the one talking doesn't have anything more to say, then just sit in silence. It's often very difficult for the listener to talk, and it's very difficult for the talker to listen. But sometimes you have to make, special goals and scenarios so that you can get some kind of balance. All right, what are your gifts? Okay, so now we're going to look at each one's gifts. So, in the personal goal section, we looked at your spiritual gifts. We looked at the things that you're naturally good at. We looked at the things that you're good at because you've worked on it. And hopefully your spouse did the same thing in that personal part. So what list did you come up with then? So so I had the gift of leadership. I think my gift has the gift of service. And she's definitely gifted at music. And she's gifted at encouragement. She's great encouraging the band and all those things. And, what else am I good at? Maybe discernment. I guess speaking. That's what I do. So we look at our gifts and then we start looking for similarities. I think both of us have the gift of faith. That's where my wife is an incredible person of faith. When she's working on, for example, the Christmas program, it's like, how's this ever going to come together? I look at it and go, it's impossible. It's not going to work this year. But she has faith. She trusts that it's all going to work out. I have faith too in terms of the church, and it's things happening and trying things and trying this particular thing right here. Will it work? I don't know, but I'm willing to try it. I'm willing to step out in faith. So that's what I think, this connection of faith makes it great for us as a couple in a church. I feel like it's not like I have the job of being the pastor and I'm in it on my own. I have someone who is making this whole thing happen here at Pathway Church as much as I am. My wife is much responsible for anything that happens at Pathway than I am responsible. We're like co-leaders, and we have been our entire ministry. I know sometimes pastors and pastors' wives don't have that. The wife says, that's your job. I have a different job. But for us, because of our gifts, there's some synergy there. And so, we can make goals together in terms of ministry. So if you look at your life, you look at the gifts that you have. Now maybe you don't have that synergy, the same kind of synergy we do, but how in the light of your same gifts or totally different gifts, what kinds of goals can you, sometimes as a married couple, you have to have goals that sort of favor the one, and you have to accommodate. And then sometimes you have to have goals that favor the other, and then that spouse accommodates. So marriage is a shared thing, but it's also an accommodating thing. And that's really hard, because we live in a world right now where everything is sort of focused on everyone's special interest. In other words, there's a whole group of people that like exactly like the things that I like. And so I can OD into one thing. I don't have to compromise. Schools are huge now today, and because they're so huge, there's going to be a group that thinks and acts and likes exactly the same things that you do. But back in the day, there was a one-room school house, and all the grades were in one room. And sometimes the teacher favored these kids, and sometimes the teacher favored these kids. And when the teacher was favoring these kids over here, these kids had to accommodate. They had to learn how to compromise. I don't think people are learning how to compromise anymore. We're not. And so marriage is particularly a hard thing for people to do, because marriage is a compromise situation. You've got two opposite people. For whatever reason, God made us, sort of desiring to connect to someone who's not like us. Opposites attract. But we live in a world where we never have to deal with opposites. So I think people are struggling with that. They get married, but then 2, 3, 4, 5 years down the road, it's like, hold it. Who in the world did I marry? You're nothing like me. So look at your gifts, learn to accommodate. All right. In your light of your gift differences and similarities, what goals can you think of? Okay. Next one. I don't know why I have so many of these. Okay. What are your marriage values? Okay, now we're looking at values. Remember we made that list? We made a list of, my value was I'm creative, I like adventure, I like, risk taking. Okay, now these are my values, but what are our marriage values? What do we share together? So now we're not talking about our personal values, but as a married couple, what values do we have? So, I have adventure as a value, but my wife has a value of staying home. So you can see here, so now we have to have a value that sort of accommodates these two. So we have the value of both staying home and adventure. I don't know what that's called. I don't know if it has a name. But sometimes we stay at home and sometimes we go out on an adventure. And we've learned how to appreciate both of those things. So you can see where this is a little bit harder. It's easy to figure out your own personal values. Now, other values that we shared similar parenting. Neither one of us like to spend money. We don't go out to eat very often. We can't waste money. My wife was raised that way. I was raised that way. We were both raised with hard work. My wife is a hard worker. I'm a hard worker. I'm not afraid of work. She's not afraid of work. Whenever we do anything, she is in there. If there's things to lift, she's not very big, but she will lift. If we're taking a couch out, she's going to grab one end too. She's not like one of those ladies who just sit on the sideline. Okay? I wasn't raised that way. She wasn't raised that way. She was raised on a farm. I moved to a farm when I was in 9th grade. So we share a lot of similar values, but we have to compromise with other values. In the light of your shared marriage values, what goals can you think of that might improve your marriage? Okay, so now look at our values. Now what goals can we have? So, for us, it might be on money. It might be on, on the work of the household work, and fixing things and dreaming of what we're going to do with our house. So those kinds of things. Okay, in the light of your marriage vision statement. Okay, now remember I think it was the second video, I asked you to write out a marriage vision statement, a personal vision statement, then a marriage vision statement. Maybe you did that, maybe you didn't. But if you did, in light of that vision statement, what goals can you think of? All right, well, what kind of goals are we talking about? Well, first of all, there's lifetime goals. What do you want your marriage to be for your lifetime? Looking back, when you're both sitting in that rest home and you're like, you're holding hands and you're going, what did we do? What did we want to do? So for us, one of our lifetime goals would be to see every one of our children solidly in the church, walking with God every day. We have 3 of them that are married. The 3 that are married, their spouses are walking with God. The grandchildren are walking with God. We're starting to pray for our grandchildren's spouses. So lifetime goals is that that we do things as a married couple, that we become an example to our kids as to what a Christian marriage could or should be. Now that's a scary thought right there. I'm going to be the example that my kids follow. I better pay attention, right? It's interesting. Kids know exactly what their parents' marriage is like. You can't hide. You can't hide a thing from your kids. Your kids know. You may argue behind closed doors, but they know exactly what you're doing. They know how each one treats the other. And they're learning, and even if they don't like how you do it, they are apt to do the same thing when they get married. So that makes it, a huge responsibility. So that's like a lifetime marriage goal. Long-term goals. Okay, so as a married couple, what's our long-term goals? You know, we had children, and that was kind of a long-term, as a 20-year thing, you know, where they're around, you got to take care of them, and you got to go through the, you know, little kid years, and then they become teenagers. We had 4 teenage boys at one point. And, you know, then they start going to school, and then are they going to college, and how are you going to pay for all these things, and their friends, and how are we going to deal with their friends, all of that stuff. Now, you know, 3 of our kids are married. The other one is a professor over at Georgetown University in Washington, D.C. So what's our long-term goals with our kids and our grandkids? And number 3, short-term goals. Yeah, that's most of our day-to-day things. You know, it's good to stop. It's like a retreat kind of thing. What is our lifetime goals? What are our long-term goals? If you don't think about that, life just rolls along. And all of a sudden, you're old, and you go, what happened? And I see, you know, married couples, and you know, they were just kind of moving along through life, having life push them, and then they get to a certain stage. A lot of empty nesters, you know, they had the goals of work and kids, and all of a sudden they're empty nesters, and they don't even know if they like each other anymore. And you'll see a lot of divorces in the empty nest time period. And why? Because it was like a big surprise. All of a sudden the kids are gone. I mean, we should know this is coming, right? We just look ahead. But we rarely look far down the road, and we keep getting surprised. Take a long look. Most of our lives are around the short-term goals. But how to make a short-term goal you can live with and actually accomplish. Number 1, be specific. Okay, be specific in what you want to do. As a married couple, we're going to have date night. When is date night? Okay, make sure it's measurable. We're going to do a date night every other Friday. At what time? I mean, if you don't make it specific, we're going to have date night. I heard date night is a really good thing to do, so we're going to do that. And then, you know, next week comes, no date night. And then a month goes by, you still no date night. Then you go on one date night. If you're going to make a goal, it has to be specific, has to be measurable. Give yourself a deadline. Okay? When are we going to accomplish things? One of the things my wife and I were trying to sell some stuff. We got some things on eBay. So we made a goal. We're going to every week we're going to give so many hours to this thing. Or, you know, we're trying to clean our house. We're trying to get things in order. I'm starting to read some books on that. My wife is reading some books on that. And it's like, okay, we need a plan. Okay, she's always pushing me for a plan. I don't want a plan, because if you have a plan, that means you have to do it. I hate cleaning up because I don't know where to put things. And if I put things away, I'll never find it again. So I have an aversion to this whole process. So I don't want the plan. But my wife is right. If you don't come up with a plan, you don't do it. You just keep putting it off, procrastinating. Give yourself a deadline. We're going to have a plan by such and such a time. And then it's going to be measurable. It's going to be specific. If possible, plan a reward or a penalty on whether you accomplish your goal or not. Okay, we don't get to go out to eat. Or you know, we get to take a day to ourselves if we accomplish this thing. If we work 3 hours on the house, then we get to go out to eat. If we don't, then we don't get to eat at all. I don't know. You have to come up with your own penalties. Okay. Time to prioritize marriage goals. Okay, so all this stuff I've been throwing at you now under the whole marriage section is, you know, write goals. Goals about your values, goals about your personality traits, goals about your gifts, goals about your vision, long-term goals, lifetime goals, short-term goals. And, you know, if you've been doing this, you're going to have goals all over the place. So now what? You can't possibly do all the goals that you've written down. So, what to do? How do you prioritize? Option 1. Just go back to the quick start and make one or both of those your goal. Remember, the quick start was where are you hurting in your marriage? Where's one point where you're hurting in your marriage? Take that and turn it into a goal. Or where do you want to take things to the next level? Take that, make it a goal. If you each had a separate one, you've got 4 goals right there. That's enough to work on. You don't want any more than that. 4 goals that you're actually going to get specific, measurable, timelines, rewards, punishments, and to follow through with. Or option 2, go through all the goals you came up with, with all the values, the personality traits, the gifts, the vision statements, all that stuff, and apply one or more of these criteria to prioritize your goals. What criteria are we talking about? Right here. Prioritize criteria. Which goals are the most urgent? Okay, if your house is on fire, the number one thing is to grab a bucket or a hose and start spraying it down, or I suppose call 911. I'm not sure which one you should do. Probably 911. Okay, so what's on fire in your marriage? What is the thing that you absolutely need to do? Number 2, which goals are the most important? Why work on things that aren't that important? Is your devotional life important? Is your intimacy life important? Is your talking to each other and enjoying each other's company important? What's important? I know maybe you have kids, and you have work, and you have church, you have all these things, these time commitments, and your marriage is the thing that's suffering. Your marriage is like, in a plane where they say put the mask on yourself before you put your mask on your child. That's your marriage. If your marriage goes down, the whole ship goes under. The whole family goes under. The best thing you can do for your children is to love your spouse. So make some priority for your spouse. Number 3, which goals, if accomplished, would make the biggest difference in your life? A lot of times we gravitate towards those things that don't make much of a difference, and we ignore the things that make a big difference. Which goals do you think you are most willing and ready to actually pursue? So sometimes there's the important thing. This is the thing I should do, but I just won't do it. Well, is there anything that you will do? Maybe that's where you start. Start with the thing that you will do. At least get a win, get a success. Because you know what a win does? You know what success does? It inspires you to keep going. Number 5, which goals do you think you could most easily and assuredly accomplish? I guess that's my last point. Maybe you need to start with something easy. Just get one win. And then go for the second. And then the third. And then maybe you'll have enough energy to take on the thing that you really want to take on. All right, time wasters in your marriage. Where do you waste a lot of marriage time? Maybe just sitting there watching TV. Probably, this is what I see couples do. Couples sit and watch a movie, but they both have their phone. And they're not really watching the movie together. They're both surfing the internet separately as they sit on the couch, supposedly watching the movie together. They go out to dinner, and again, they're on the phone. They're doing their own thing. They're following their own purpose, their own interests, their own desires. They're not spending much time. Number 2, what time waster do you need to eliminate? Maybe the phone. Maybe you need some can you actually have an hour with your spouse without your phone? Is that possible? Or reduce in your marriage. Number 3, what demands of others do you need to eliminate or reduce in your life to concentrate on your marriage? And that for a lot of married couples, it's kids. Kids will take all your time if you let them. Don't let them. You got to put your oxygen mask on first, or your kids are going to suffer. Your kids are watching you and your marriage to see how they're going to operate in life. So the best thing, again, that you can do for your kids is love your spouse. What gets in the way of marriage time? Okay, probably kids, family, work. Everything else in your life gets in the way of marriage. So sit down together and how can we, if our marriage is going to work, we have to make specific goals that are going to help our marriage. All right, well, I hope you get the point. Next is the family one.